Sound of dramatic orchestral music building, crowd cheering fading to ominous silence. October 3rd, 2003. The Mirage Hotel, Las Vegas. Roy Horn's 59th birthday. 1,500 expectant faces fill the custom-built theater for another night of impossible magic. But something is different tonight. Something in the air, in the way shadows fall across the stage, in the amber eyes of a 400-pound white tiger named Manticore, who has decided this performance will be his last. The man celebrating his birthday has no idea he's about to become prey. The master magician who has spent 30 years believing love could tame apex predators is about to learn that some bonds exist only in human imagination. In 10 seconds, the most successful magic show in entertainment history will become its most horrifying tragedy. A birthday celebration will become a bloodbath, and Roy Horn will discover that no amount of love can change what evolution created. A perfect killing machine wrapped in magnificent white fur. Roy Horn wasn't just another Las Vegas entertainer. He was a man who had built his entire identity around an impossible relationship, genuine friendship with creatures designed by nature to kill without mercy. Born in Germany in 1944, Roy had been drawn to dangerous animals since childhood, seeing beauty where others saw terror, connection where others saw only instinct. His partnership with Siegfried had transformed Las Vegas entertainment forever. Together, they had created something unprecedented, a magic show where the real magic wasn't illusion, but the apparent bond between human and predator. Night after night, Roy would enter the stage with tigers and lions that could tear him apart in seconds, yet they seemed to follow his every command with devotion that bordered on worship. People think it's about control, Roy would tell reporters, but it's about love. These animals love me and I love them. We understand each other in ways that go beyond words. That philosophy had made them the highest-paid entertainers in Las Vegas history. Their show at the Mirage grossed over $100 million annually, sold out every night for over a decade, and inspired a generation of performers who dreamed of achieving similar connections with wild animals. But Roy's greatest strength was also his fatal weakness. His complete faith in the love between human and predator had made him fearless in situations that should have terrified any rational person. He performed without barriers, without safety nets, without the protective distance that wildlife experts insisted was essential when working with apex predators. If you show fear, they sense it, Roy explained. If you doubt the relationship, it breaks. I never doubt, I never fear, and they never hurt me. Until they did. Manticore was everything Roy believed proved his theories about human-animal relationships. A 7-year-old white Siberian tiger weighing 400 pounds, raised by Roy since he was a 6-week-old cub. For over 6 years, Manticore had been Roy's favorite, the tiger he trusted most, the living symbol of his belief that love could transcend species barriers. White tigers are among the rarest animals on Earth, genetic anomalies that occur perhaps once in 10,000 births. Manticore's pristine white coat marked with perfect black stripes made him not just rare but absolutely magnificent. His ice-blue eyes seemed to hold intelligence that approached human understanding. Roy had bottle-fed Manticore as a cub, slept in the same bed with him, raised him more like a son than a wild animal. The massive tiger had performed in hundreds of shows without incident, following Roy's commands with precision that seemed to prove their extraordinary bond. But beneath that white fur beat the heart of an apex predator. 4-inch canine teeth designed to crush vertebrae, jaw muscles that could generate over 1,000 pounds of bite force, claws that could shred flesh from bone with surgical precision, reflexes so fast they could snatch birds from the air. Manticore was still fundamentally what evolution had created over millions of years. A solitary hunter programmed to kill efficiently and without mercy. 6 years of performing tricks and following commands had never changed his basic nature. They had only created an illusion of domestication that was about to shatter in the most brutal way possible. October 3rd, 2003, should have been a night of celebration. Roy Horn's 59th birthday, marking another year of defying every expert who had warned him about the dangers of working with apex predators. The Mirage Theater was sold out, as it was every night. with tourists from around the world eager to witness the impossible partnership between man and beast. The show began at 8:30, following the same format that had thrilled audiences for over a decade. Elaborate illusions, impossible magic, and the gradual introduction of the big cats that made Siegfried and Roy unlike any other entertainment in the world. The early acts proceeded flawlessly. Other tigers performed their routines with perfect precision, following Roy's commands with the obedience that had convinced millions of people that these deadly predators were actually gentle giants who enjoyed performing for human audiences. Roy appeared completely confident, moving among his cats with the casual ease of someone who had never doubted his safety for a single moment. To the audience, he looked like a man who had achieved something miraculous, genuine communication with creatures that most humans would never dare approach. But experienced animal handlers watching the show that night later reported subtle signs that something was different. Manticore seemed more alert than usual, more focused on the audience than on Roy. His positioning was slightly off, his responses to commands a fraction slower than normal. Manticore saved Roy's life, became the party line that was repeated in media interviews and official statements. The attack was reframed as a rescue attempt, the blood and violence reimagined as misunderstood devotion. Roy himself, once he recovered enough to speak, supported this version of events. "If a tiger attacks you, you are finished," he would say in later interviews. "The fact that I'm alive proves that Manticore was trying to save me, not hurt me." But this narrative required ignoring the testimony of multiple witnesses who had seen the attack from different angles. It required dismissing the medical evidence of crushing bite wounds and predatory behavior. Most importantly, it required believing that a wild animal had somehow developed human emotions and motivations that simply don't exist in apex predators. For 16 years, the official story remained unchallenged in public. But in 2019, head trainer Chris Lawrence finally broke his silence and revealed what had really happened that night. According to Lawrence, who was present during the attack, Roy had made critical handling errors during the performance. A woman in the front row holding a child had distracted Manticore, causing the tiger to lose focus on Roy's commands. When Roy tried to regain control, he fell backward over Manticore's legs, triggering the predatory response that nearly killed him. Roy fell over, and Manticore got on top of him, Lawrence revealed. It was a tiger being a tiger. There was no stroke before the attack, no rescue attempt, no special bond that protected Roy. It was simply a wild animal reverting to its fundamental nature when the artificial controls of entertainment failed. Lawrence's account painted a very different picture of the incident. Not a medical emergency followed by a rescue attempt, but a handling error that triggered natural predatory behavior from an animal that had never been truly domesticated, despite 6 years of performances. The cover-up, according to Lawrence, was motivated by multiple factors: protecting Manticore from being euthanized, preserving Roy's reputation as an animal expert, maintaining the financial value of the Siegfried and Roy brand, and avoiding legal liability for the incident. Roy Horn's career ended in those 10 seconds on stage. The show that had generated over $100 million annually was permanently canceled. 130 cast and crew members lost their jobs overnight. An entire entertainment empire built on the illusion of human-animal partnership collapsed in the time it took for a tiger to remember what it truly was. Roy's recovery was long, painful, and incomplete. The stroke and spinal injuries left him partially paralyzed, confined to a wheelchair, struggling with speech and mobility issues that would plague him for the rest of his life. The man who had moved with balletic grace among deadly predators was reduced to requiring assistance with basic daily activities. But perhaps most tragically, Roy never acknowledged the reality of what had happened to him. Until his death from COVID-19 complications in May 2020, he maintained that Manticore had tried to save his life, rather than end it. The illusion that had nearly killed him remained more real to him than the physical evidence of his injuries. Manticore lived for 11 more years after the attack, maintained at Siegfried and Roy's private facility until his natural death in 2014. The tiger that had ended the most famous magic show in history spent his final years as a reminder of what happens when humans forget that wild animals are wild, regardless of how much love and training they receive. Roy Horn's final performance was his most honest one. No illusion, no misdirection, just the raw truth about what happens when 30 years of accumulated delusion meets 400 pounds of apex predator. His belief in the power of love to transcend species barriers was tested in the most brutal way possible and found fatally wanting. Never acknowledging that his greatest magic trick, convincing the world that wild animals could be tamed by love, was the most dangerous deception of all. On October 3, 2003, Roy Horn took his final bow not by choice but by nature's design. The master magician who had spent his life creating impossible illusions became the subject of his own final trick, the disappearing act that nearly made him vanish forever. His 59th birthday became a reminder that some magic is too dangerous to perform, some bonds too impossible to forge, and some wild animals too perfect in their predatory design to ever be truly tamed by human love. The curtain fell on Siegfried and Roy, not with thunderous applause, but with the sound of sirens, the sight of blood. Roy Horn's final show was his most memorable, not because it was magical, but because it was brutally, horribly real. These were warning signs that Roy either missed or chose to ignore. After 30 years of performing with big cats, he had developed complete confidence in his ability to read their moods and respond to potential problems. But confidence and reality are different things, and reality was about to demonstrate just how wrong Roy's confidence had become. When Manticore's moment came, everything seemed normal. The massive white tiger entered the stage with his usual grace, positioned himself for the planned illusion, responded to Roy's initial commands with apparent cooperation. The audience held its breath in anticipation of another magical moment between man and predator. Then, in the space of a heartbeat, 30 years of accumulated luck ran out. The exact trigger for what happened next remains disputed. Trainer Chris Lawrence would later claim that a woman in the front row holding a child had distracted Manticore, causing the tiger to lose focus on Roy's commands. Others suggested that Roy himself had made a handling error, breaking protocols that had kept him safe for decades. But the cause didn't matter once Manticore's predatory instincts took control. The massive tiger that had been Roy's most trusted partner suddenly saw him not as a beloved companion but as prey in his territory. What followed happened so fast that human eyes could barely process it. Manticore's massive paws knocked Roy backward, sending him tumbling over the tiger's legs. As Roy struggled to regain his footing, 400 pounds of apex predator landed on top of him, with crushing force. The tiger's jaws, designed by evolution to kill creatures much larger than humans, clamped down on Roy's neck with hydraulic pressure. 4-inch canine teeth punctured his throat and spine, tearing through flesh and crushing vertebrae with clinical efficiency. The audience's initial confusion, many thought this was part of the act, quickly turned to horror as blood became visible on the stage. Roy's body went limp in Manticore's jaws. The man who had spent his life believing in the power of love reduced to a rag doll in the grip of a perfect killing machine. What happened next would haunt witnesses for the rest of their lives. Manticore, following instincts programmed by millions of years of evolution, began dragging Roy across the stage the way wild tigers drag prey to secure feeding locations. The massive predator gripped Roy by the neck and began pulling him toward the wings, leaving a trail of blood across the stage that had hosted thousands of magical performances. Roy's unconscious body scraped against the floor as 1,500 people watched in paralyzed horror. Siegfried, watching from the side of the stage, began screaming, "No! No! No!" as he ran toward his partner of 40 years. But even the master magician who had created impossible illusions could not make this nightmare disappear. Other trainers rushed onto the stage with emergency protocols that had been rehearsed but never used in 30 years of performances. They shouted commands at Manticore, tried to distract him with food and familiar cues, attempted everything they had been trained to do in exactly this situation. But Manticore was no longer responding to human commands. The tiger that had followed Roy's directions for 6 years was now operating on pure predatory instinct, focused only on securing his kill and defending it from the other humans who were trying to interfere. The dragging continued for what seemed like an eternity, but lasted only seconds. Manticore pulled Roy approximately 15 feet across the stage before finally releasing him in the wings. The massive predator finally responding to the desperate efforts of the other trainers to regain control. As emergency medical teams rushed onto the stage, the full extent of Roy's injuries became clear. The 4-inch puncture wounds in his neck had narrowly missed his carotid artery. The difference between severe injury and instant death measured in millimeters, but the damage was still catastrophic. Manticore's bite had severed Roy's spinal cord, causing immediate paralysis. The crushing force of the attack had triggered a massive stroke. Blood loss was severe and ongoing. The man who had spent his life defying death had finally met a predator that wouldn't be denied. The audience was evacuated quickly but calmly, most people still struggling to process what they had witnessed. Many would later describe feeling like they had watched a loved one die. So complete was the illusion that Roy and his tigers were family, rather than predator and prey. Roy was airlifted to University Medical Center in Las Vegas, where trauma surgeons worked frantically to save his life. The injuries were so severe that doctors initially gave him little chance of survival. Emergency surgery to stop the bleeding, additional procedures to address the stroke damage, months of intensive care that would determine whether the master magician would ever perform again. Meanwhile, back at the Mirage, Manticore was secured in his holding area, apparently calm and unbothered by what had happened. To the tiger, this had not been an aberrant behavior or a moment of madness. This had been natural. This had been what tigers do when the artificial constraints of entertainment finally fail to contain their true nature. Almost immediately after the attack, a carefully orchestrated campaign began to reshape the narrative of what had happened that night. The story that emerged was designed to protect both Roy's reputation and Manticore's life, but it bore little resemblance to what witnesses had actually seen. According to the official version promoted by Siegfried and Roy's organization, Roy had suffered a stroke on stage, and Manticore had tried to help him by dragging him to safety. The tiger wasn't a vicious predator, but a loyal companion attempting to protect his beloved trainer.